She felt his presence before she even looked up, that quiet heat that always made her chest tighten. And when she finally met his eyes, it was like the room itself paused. No music, no chatter, just the heavy, electric silence between two people who once trusted each other too deeply, and maybe still did. He stood there holding his phone, jaw tense, fingers curled around the device like it had burned him. She didn't know what he had seen yet, but she felt it. Something was wrong. Something had cracked. He stepped closer, slow but deliberate, as if torn between wanting answers and wanting to remember what her touch felt like. She tried to smile, tried to pretend everything was normal, but his gaze didn't soften. It only lingered on her lips, her hands, the place where her necklace rested against her skin. A gaze that used to feel like home now felt like a warning. A question. An accusation without a word spoken. "Tell me it's not what it looks like," he murmured, voice softened by hurt rather than anger. And she froze. The air shifted. Her heartbeat stumbled. She didn't know what he had found, but she knew what she had promised: loyalty, honesty, forever. Yet the uncertainty in his eyes told her that forever might have shattered with a single screenshot. She took a step toward him, small, hesitant, hoping closeness could bridge the distance. He didn't move away. If anything, he leaned slightly forward, like habit pulled him toward her even when everything else pushed him back. Their breaths mingled for a moment. Too close for strangers. Too far for lovers. Her fingers brushed his wrist, barely a touch, but enough to remind them how fragile the line between tenderness and truth could be. "Let me explain," she whispered. And it was the way her voice trembled, not with guilt, but with fear, that made him blink, just once, like he wasn't sure if he should stay or walk away. The screenshot still glowed on his phone screen between them, a silent threat. 1 second could end everything. 1 word could save it. He looked at her, eyes dark, conflicted, burning with questions he wasn't ready to ask. And then, he turned the screen toward her. Cut to black. The glow of the phone screen lingered between them like a wound that hadn't decided whether it was going to bleed or bruise. She looked at the blurred screenshot, her breath catching as if someone had pressed a hand to her chest. She didn't even try to touch the phone, she just looked at him, really looked, searching for the version of him that trusted her, that believed her voice before he believed anything else. His eyes stayed on her, dark and steady, but there was something trembling beneath the surface. Hurt, yes, but also something warmer, something he wasn't ready to admit. His hand holding the phone lowered slightly, as though part of him already regretted showing it. She noticed the way his fingers tightened, how his shoulders dropped just a fraction, like the weight of doubt had become too much to carry. "Tell me," he said finally, his tone softer, less like a demand and more like a plea he couldn't hide anymore. She stepped closer, slow and careful, as if he were a fire she wasn't sure would warm her or burn her. The space between them shrank until she could feel the heat of his body, the familiar scent of him, comforting and devastating all at once. Her voice shook when she spoke. "It's not what you think." He exhaled, long and uneven, like he'd been holding his breath long before he walked into the room. For a moment he didn't speak. He just looked at her, his eyes drifting to her lips before snapping back up as if he'd caught himself wanting too much. "Then what is it?" His voice was quiet, almost fragile. She swallowed hard. Her fingers, without meaning to, brushed his arm. It was barely a touch, feather-light, but he felt it. She could tell he did. His breath faltered, his posture softened, his anger loosened into confusion, into longing. "I wouldn't betray you," she whispered. His jaw tightened. Not in anger, in restraint. As if everything in him wanted to believe her, wanted to reach for her, pull her closer, but the fear held him still. They stood there, breathing the same tense air, sharing a silence filled with everything they couldn't say. Her eyes glistened. His softened. He lowered the phone completely now, hanging by his side like it no longer mattered as much as the woman standing in front of him. For one unguarded moment, his hand almost lifted toward her cheek, almost. But he stopped, fingers hovering inches from her skin. She didn't move away. He didn't either. And the space between almost and too late tightened until it hurt. The space between them felt impossibly small, yet neither of them crossed it. His hand hovered in the air, suspended between instinct and fear, between wanting her and wanting to protect himself from her. She felt the warmth of his fingers even without his touch, a ghost of contact that made her chest tighten painfully. For a moment, she thought he would finally close the distance. For a moment he thought so too. But then he pulled his hand back, slow, almost reluctant, like it hurt him to let go of something he hadn't even touched. His gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted again, conflicted, pained, hungry for honesty and terrified of it at the same time. She took a shaky breath, her heart hammering so loudly she wondered if he could hear it. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "Then why didn't you?" His voice wasn't sharp, it was soft, tired, threaded with a kind of ache she had never heard from him before. Her throat tightened. There were so many reasons. Too many. Reasons that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with fear. Fear of losing him, fear of disappointing him, fear of letting him see the parts of her she kept hidden even from herself. "Because I didn't want you to think I was like that," she said, her voice barely steady. His jaw twitched. Not in judgment, but in the quiet pain of someone who knew he was hurting someone he didn't want to hurt. "I don't," he said softly. I don't know what to believe right now." She nodded, even though the words sliced through her. She stepped closer again, drawn to him like gravity had rewired itself around his presence. Her fingers brushed his, accidental, unplanned, but neither of them moved away. His hand tightened instinctively, catching the edge of her fingertips before releasing them again. It was nothing. It was everything. He exhaled shakily, eyes drifting to her mouth for half a second, barely enough to notice, yet more than enough to betray him. She felt warmth rush through her, a longing she tried so hard to hide from him, from herself. "You think I don't care?" he murmured, eyes locking onto hers with a depth that made her breath catch. "But you have no idea what you do to me." Her lips parted, a quiet inhale slipping out. She wanted to step into him. She wanted to lean forward. She wanted to forget the screenshot, the fear, the doubt. But he stepped back first, just one step, but it felt like a door closing between them. Not because he didn't want her. Because he wanted her too much. And wanting her hurt. He stepped back, but the space he created didn't feel like distance, it felt like a wound. She watched him, her breath trembling, her fingers curling slightly at her sides as though her body refused to accept the space he forced between them. He dragged a hand through his hair, a frustrated, helpless gesture, and for the first time she saw the truth he was trying so hard to hide. He wasn't angry at her. He was terrified of how much she mattered. "Every time I look at you," he said quietly, "I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't control." Her breath hitched. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, raw and unfiltered, stripped of every wall he tried to build. She took a small step toward him, slow enough that he could stop her if he wanted. He didn't. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "Not even once." He let out a low exhale, eyes meeting hers with the honesty that made her chest sting. "Then why does it feel like losing you is the one thing I can't survive?" The words hit her harder than any accusation. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The air felt charged, too warm, too full of them. She moved closer, not touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath brush her cheek. His eyes dropped to her mouth for a second too long. Her heart stumbled. "Say something," he murmured, voice soft, begging without meaning to. She lifted her hand slowly, hesitantly, until her fingertips hovered near his jaw. Not touching. Just a breath away. His eyes fluttered shut as if he could feel it anyway. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of how much I want you to believe me." His eyes opened, and in them burned something fierce and aching. Something he had tried to bury but could no longer hide. He reached up, mirroring her movement, his fingers stopping just shy of her cheek. The almost touch was worse than contact. It was fire at a distance. "Every part of me wants to pull you close," he said, voice trembling. "Then why don't you?" she breathed. His lips parted, a confession caught somewhere between surrender and restraint. "Because if I do, I won't be able to stop." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It throbbed. It pulsed. It took the shape of the kiss they didn't dare give into. They stood there, forehead to almost forehead, breath to breath, hearts racing like they had already crossed the line. And then, nothing. The world held still, waiting for a moment that almost happened. The storm came quietly that night, soft rain tapping against the windows like it was trying not to interrupt them. The world outside blurred into silver streaks while inside, the air felt warmer, tighter, as if the room itself knew what either of them dared to say out loud. She stood near the window, her back to him, her shoulders rising and falling with each careful breath. He watched her from across the room, his heartbeat unsteady, his hands restless at his sides. Something had cracked open between them earlier, something raw, unguarded, fragile. And neither of them had found the strength to close it again. When she finally turned toward him, her eyes carried the weight of everything she'd held in for too long. Fear, longing, guilt, hope, all braided together in a single, trembling look. He stepped closer, slow and hesitant at first, then with something heavier pulling him forward. When he reached her, he didn't touch her immediately. He just stood there, letting their breaths meet before their bodies did. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he whispered. Her lips parted, barely a sound escaping. "I'm afraid of myself, of how much I feel when you're this close." He lifted a hand, giving her every chance to stop him. She didn't. His fingertips brushed her cheek, just the lightest touch, but she leaned into it like she'd been waiting for it for days, months, maybe longer. Her breath melted into his, soft and warm, until their foreheads nearly touched. The world outside faded to nothing but rain and heartbeat. The distance between them disappeared slowly, like a sigh unraveling. His thumb grazed her jaw. Her hand found his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath her palm. Their bodies didn't rush. They moved like they were rediscovering the language they once spoke without words. When he pulled her closer, it wasn't forceful, just inevitable. Her body fit against his as if the universe had been waiting for this alignment. Their breasts tangled, heavy and trembling. His lips brushed her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, not kisses, but promises. Silent confessions. Electricity disguised as tenderness. The air thickened. Her fingers slid up his neck, curling at the back of his hair. His breath hitched against her skin. She felt it. Felt everything. His restraint, his longing, his fear of losing control, and his deeper fear of losing her. Their bodies spoke the words neither could say. He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed, voice barely a whisper. "Tell me you want this." She exhaled, shakier than she intended. "I've wanted you even when I tried not to." Something inside him broke quietly. Softly. Beautifully. Their lips finally brushed. Not a kiss, not fully, but enough to steal the breath from both of them. Enough to silence the storm inside her chest and ignite the one inside his. The night wrapped around them, warm and slow, as they let go, not of themselves, but of every wall they had ever built. Their breaths blended. Their hearts aligned. And the room held its breath as the moment deepened, right before it became something neither of them could take back. Morning arrived softly, almost apologetically, as if the sky knew the night had taken too much from them and didn't dare come in too loud. Pale light slipped through the curtains, settling gently on the room where silence sat heavier than any storm. She was the first to stir. Not from regret, not from fear, but from the overwhelming awareness of the man lying beside her. His breathing was steady, slow, almost peaceful, and for a moment she allowed herself to watch him. The softness of his expression, the way his hand rested near hers but not touching, like he didn't know if he had the right anymore. Her chest tightened. Everything felt different. Not wrong. Not right. Just real. She sat up quietly, pulling her knees to her chest, hugging them as if trying to hold herself together. The memories of the night wrapped around her, not actions, but feelings, his breath trembling against hers, the way his hands steadied her, the way her heart fractured open in his embrace. Was it love? Or was it two people clinging to something warm in the middle of their fear? He finally opened his eyes, blinking against the morning light. When he saw her sitting there, his face shifted, not shocked, not regretful, but uncertain in a way that made her pulse stutter. "Hey," he murmured, voice rough from sleep. She swallowed. "Hey." They sat with the word hanging between them, either knowing what to do with it. He pushed himself upright, running a hand slowly through his hair. "Last night," he started, but the sentence broke apart before it reached meaning. She looked down at her hands. "I know." He exhaled, long and quiet. "I don't want you to think it was a mistake." Her eyes lifted, and for the first time she saw the guilt sitting behind his pupils, not for what they did, but for how much it meant to him. For how deeply he'd fallen without meaning to. "I just don't know what happens now," he admitted. "We crossed something we can't uncross." Before she could respond, a soft knock rattled the front door. They froze. Her heart lurched. His jaw clenched. Another knock, firmer. He stood, tension rippling through his shoulders. "I wasn't expecting anyone." She felt the night collapse into her chest, replaced by a new, sharper kind of fear. Whoever was on the other side of that door wasn't just early. They were about to change everything. The knock at the door became the moment everything crystallized. He opened it slowly, tension carved into his shoulders, but the person waiting on the other side wasn't a threat. It was his sister, eyes wide with worry, holding a forgotten wallet he'd left at her place. She barely spoke before she rushed off again, leaving only surprise and silence behind. The moment the door clicked shut, the house felt different. Not dangerous. Not broken. Just exposed. He turned back to her, still sitting on the edge of the bed, fingers tangled in the sheets as though grounding herself. The fear in her eyes softened into something else, surrender maybe. Understanding. A choice waiting to be made. He walked toward her, each step slow, deliberate, uncertain. She stood before he reached her. They met in the center of the room where the morning light painted them in quiet gold. "I thought we lost everything," he whispered. Her throat tightened. "Maybe we did. Maybe that's why we found this." He reached for her hand, not with urgency, but with the gentleness of someone asking permission. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined slowly, as if the universe was giving them one more chance to hold on. "I saw that screenshot," he said softly, "and I felt the world collapse. But last night," his voice broke. "Last night felt like truth. Not an escape. Not a mistake." She stepped closer, her forehead brushing his. "Then trust what you felt. Not what you feared." His breath trembled. Her hands rested on his chest, and for the first time he didn't tense. He let himself lean into her touch. Into the warmth he'd been fighting for too long. He whispered her name, a sound that held apology, longing, and something dangerously close to love. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet between them settle into something whole. He pressed his lips to her forehead, soft, slow, reverent, the kind of touch that heals more than it hurts. Her arms slid around him, not desperate, but steady, choosing him slowly and completely. No grand promises. No dramatic declarations. Just two people who broke, then found a way to fit their pieces together again. When they finally pulled back, there was peace in their eyes. Fragile, yes, but real. The screenshot that almost ended everything faded into something small compared to the warmth holding them now. And as the morning wrapped around them, it felt like forgiveness. Like a beginning born from the ashes of almost losing each other.